Even a legendary game developer like From Software isn't free from stinkers. So in this video, I'll be going over every Soulsborne game, starting with Demon's Souls and ending with Elden Ring, and deciding which boss has the dishonor of being the worst of that game. I've already done a best boss in each Soulsborne game video, by the way, if you want to check that out. But guys, quick thing before we start, and feel free to skip this part using the timestamps if you want. I just wanted to thank you guys for allowing me to hit my first 1,000 subscribers. I know that there's tons of huge Souls YouTubers out there, so my 1,000 subs doesn't really seem all that impressive, but it's a huge milestone for me, and I just wanted to say thank you for watching my videos and interacting, letting me know your own thoughts, even if it's to disagree, you know, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I know I don't respond to comments all that much, but I do see most of them. So thanks again, and I hope you keep enjoying watching my videos, cause I'll keep making them. Anyway, enough with the sappy stuff. Without further ado, let's get started with Demon's Souls. So, I'm one out of that rare breed of players that actually enjoy the bosses of Demon's Souls overall. Many, if not most players, have somewhat of a distaste for the bosses in this game, since a good majority of these bosses are what we call gimmick bosses. Something that I will always praise Demon's Souls for is the fact that it wasn't afraid to experiment and try out different mechanics for its bosses, even if some didn't turn out quite that well. Of course, not all gimmicks are fun, and nowhere is that highlighted more than my pick for Demon's Souls' worst boss, the Dragon God. It should surprise no one that this is my pick, as the Dragon God is considered the worst boss of Demon's Souls by many people. It's a huge waste too, with such a cool name, Dragon God. The name is up there with Dragon Lord and Demon King, but instead of fighting an all-powerful dragon, barely winning by the skin of your teeth, you're instead presented with a glorified hide-and-seek simulator. The whole point of this fight is to simply avoid the Dragon God's gaze while you slowly move about through the arena, methodically breaking any pillars in your way until you reach the two ballistas that will knock the beast down, giving you the opportunity to kill it. And believe it or not, in practice it's even more boring than what it sounds. It doesn't help that Demon's Souls isn't exactly known for its great AI. Sometimes I could swear that the dragon was looking away, but I get spotted anyway. If you get hit, then it's almost a guaranteed KO. So at least the tension in this fight is here. But it's here for a wrong reason. It's not like I'm enjoying myself here, I just don't want to repeat this slog of a fight. That's why I'm so scared of dying. The only tiny positive aspect of this is the fact that after you get through this quote-unquote fight a couple times, it's actually pretty easy. And it becomes completely trivial if you simply bring a ranged weapon with you like a bow or a spell, since you can just break the pillars in your path while being safe behind cover. This means that you can just get through the Dragon God boss fight and gain a ton of souls easily before progressing through the other Archstones, assuming of course that the Flame Lurker doesn't shitstomp you to death. So let's move on to Dark Souls 1. While I think Dark Souls 1 is absolutely amazing and close to a masterpiece, and is definitely a fan favorite of the community, the game's bosses are certainly not its greatest aspect. There's a lot of stinkers here. That said, there's really no reason for me to build up anticipation for my pick of the worst boss of Dark Souls 1. I know which it is, you know which it is, your dog knows which it is. The Bed of Chaos is not only unquestionably, undoubtedly the worst boss of Dark Souls 1, it's arguably the worst boss From Software has ever created and one of the worst bosses of any video game. Actually, it's so bad, I made a whole video talking about it. Similar to the Dragon God, the Bed of Chaos isn't actually a fight. Instead, you have a giant bug hidden inside a moving tree that constantly tries to smack you and push you off the platform. You having fun yet? To beat it, you have to make your way to both its sides first and break the two orbs that are protected by its vines. Each time you break an orb, the boss becomes more aggressive and parts of the arena crumble. After you break both of them, you have to make your way to its core by dropping down a newly revealed vine that acts as your bridge to the core. Great idea putting a fucking jumping puzzle in a game where your character feels so heavy and immobile. The whole experience is miserable, with the only small silver lining being the fact that the orbs don't actually respawn if you die. Thank God. I'll be honest, whenever I replay this boss, I never even bother to break the second orb normally. I just bring a bow and arrows and camp at a safe spot spamming arrows until I hit the left orb. And of course, you can't talk about the Bed of Chaos without mentioning the run back.
I wasted on cross country!
It takes about 2 minutes to run from the closest bonfire to this boss. And of course, you have to run through lava too, so naturally you have to have the orange charred ring equipped, just in case you were thinking of having something else. While it's certainly not the worst run back of the game, it's still pretty long and annoying, especially being tied to this boss. But perhaps the saddest part of this run back is that the closest bonfire that I just mentioned is hidden behind an invisible wall. Like, why? How much do you want your players to suffer, Miyazaki-san? Imagine being one of the poor sods who first played this game, no guides or anything, running through half of Lost Izalith only to die by being pushed off the side by a bug hidden in a tree. At least the Dragon God had the decency to place a checkpoint right outside its arena. It's really astonishing when you manage to be such a bad boss where you overshadow every other bad boss in a game that features the Capra Demon and Sith the Scaleless. Yeah, this boss can suck my ball bearing, 0 out of 10, let's move on. Hey, it's Dark Souls 2. Everyone loves Dark Souls 2. Jokes aside, Dark Souls 2 is actually a great game. It's flawed, it's definitely flawed, but a great game nonetheless. Now Dark Souls 2 had a lot of bosses. Up until Elden Ring came along, Dark Souls 2 was actually the Soulsborne game with the biggest number of bosses. And having so many bosses naturally means that you're going to have some stinkers too. Now, while I don't think Dark Souls 2 has as egregious bosses as the Dragon God or the Bed of Chaos, it has more bad bosses across the board, in my opinion. My choice for the worst boss was kinda difficult. There's a lot of bosses that could have taken the spot here, but I ended up choosing the Royal Rat Authority. At the end, I was between this and the Royal Rat Vanguard, but while the Vanguard is so lame it's not even an actual boss fight, at the very least, it's fairly easy. Just survive long enough until the quote-unquote boss shows up, kill it instantly and be on your way. The Authority, on the other hand, is not only incredibly annoying, but challenging too. In the wrong way, of course. The problem with this fight is the two smaller rats that accompany this boss. If you don't kill them quickly, and I mean quickly, they will not only stunlock you, but also probably inflict you with Toxic, unless you have very high resistance. That means that the whole fight boils down to, can you beat the rats fast enough? If the answer is yes, then you probably won't have that much trouble with the boss. But if you can't, get ready for an even shittier version of the Capra Demon boss fight from Dark Souls 1. Many believed it to be impossible, and yet, here it is. Alright, Bloodborne's up next, a game that is probably the most middle-of-the-road game when it comes to bosses. It has a few fantastic bosses, of course, but for the most part the bosses are alright, which makes it difficult to choose a worse one. So my personal pick for Bloodborne is The Living Failures. I know that many people would choose Mikolash, and I can understand why. I think the reason why I don't consider him such a bad boss is the fact that I've played Bloodborne enough times to know pretty much exactly where to go to force him into the fight. But if you're playing Bloodborne for the first time, God is that boss annoying. Anyway, back to the actual pick. The Living Failures somehow managed to be a crowd boss and a hard boss at the same time, something not usually seen in the Soulsborne games. Most of the time they're fairly easy to deal with, but then suddenly decide to spawn goddamn meteors on you that deal massive damage and can easily obliterate you instantly. I don't even have so many things to say about this boss fight, it just sucks. It's not fun, it's not engaging, and to top it all off, it's not that easy. I mean, if you're going to make a non-fun fight, at least make it easy, you know? That way I can just watch something else while waiting for this fight to end. Living Failures, more like living failure to make a good boss fight, am I right?
That sucked.
Yeah.
Alright, up next we have Dark Souls 3, which for me is undeniably the king of good quality bosses, don't at me. Dark Souls 3 has so many good bosses, and as I said in my Soulsborne games ranked by boss quality video, last plug I promise, there's very few bosses in Dark Souls 3 that I actively dislike. Really none that I fully hate. My choice for the worst boss in Dark Souls 3 is the Champion's Gravetender and the Gravetender Great Wolf. God damn, that name's a mouthful. Why, oh why, dear Ashes of Ariandel DLC, did you have to sully Dark Souls 3's honor by adding a shitty duo boss fight? Anybody who watched my other videos knows that I am not a fan of From Software duo or gank bosses, for the most part. Because, for the most part, they are not done right. You wanna see gank bosses done right? Go play Black Myth Wukong. While all G&G are hardly the worst duo boss fight in the From Software games, we'll get to those later, they're certainly not good either. The Gravetender is found first, along with 3 smaller wolves. If it were just them, it wouldn't be that much of an issue. But when the big guy comes in, you have to manage avoiding its annoying attacks, not to mention keeping the camera in control, all the while trying to focus your attacks on the Gravetender. Now fortunately the Gravetender doesn't have that much HP, so it's not too difficult bringing him down, thus allowing you to focus on the wolf. It's not the most difficult fight for sure. Hell, Sister Frida and Father Ariandel are significantly harder, but they also work significantly better as a duo boss, not to mention that only one of the phases of that boss fight is a duo fight. Either way, bad fight, bad dog, let's move on. Sekiro's up next. And look, I know it's not a Soulsborne game, alright? I'm still counting it. If it gets included in the challenge runs, then it gets included in the YouTube videos. Like Dark Souls 3, I consider Sekiro to have excellent boss quality overall. But, also like Dark Souls 3, not even it is exempt from bad boss fights. My choice for the worst boss of Sekiro goes to... the Headless Ape. Ha, I got you, didn't I? See, you thought I'd go for the folding screen monkeys. Well, I'd rather chase 4 small monkeys around rather than having to deal with 2 huge monkeys. This boss fight not only sucks, it's also extremely jarring to me as to why it even exists. I already fought the Guardian Ape once, including its headless version, which is actually a pretty good fight. Why bother having me fight this boss a second time, literally 2 areas later, and then throw another boss in for good measure? The fuck's wrong with you? This is something that Sekiro does a lot, by the way, having you fight the same boss more than once, but I can understand the reason for all other instances. It makes much more sense with Genichiro and the Owl, and hell, even the Corrupted Monk. But this boss fight just makes no sense to me. I mean, maybe there's some sort of lore reason as to why you have to fight this boss again, but honestly, who cares? It's just a miserable experience having to fight 2 tough enemies at the same time. It doesn't help that they take turns ganging up on you too, so you can't really choose to focus on one of them. Usually they alternate between which is more aggressive and which is more passive, so you're kinda forced to attack the one that's more aggressive at any given point. There's no walls or pillars to separate them or anything, it's just 2 apes trying to kill you in a big open area. And again, there is no reason from a gameplay perspective for this boss fight to exist. Just having the Guardian Ape boss fight would have been perfect. Anyway, not much else to see here, so let's wrap this video up with Elden Ring. Now, before we get into Elden Ring, I do have to clarify something. See, Elden Ring is special in which it has an absolutely staggering amount of bosses. The majority of these bosses, however, are small end of dungeon or field bosses that are usually normal enemy variants or variants of other bosses. I could easily choose any one of those for this spot, but that wouldn't really be fair. They're only there to populate the dungeons and the huge open world, so they're not really going to be included in this video. By the way, if you want me to rank all the lesser bosses in another video, let me know in the comments please. Anyway, I've already mentioned which Elden Ring boss fight I consider the worst in another video, but here it is again. The Valiant Gargoyles are, in my opinion, the worst, most miserable major boss fight in Elden Ring. And yes, they are considered a major boss. They are in the great enemy tier and even have an achievement tied to them. When choosing the worst boss fight in Elden Ring, I'm always torn between these guys and the Godskin duo, as I think both of them have merits to be placed in the top spot. On the one hand, the Godskin duo is mandatory, so you couldn't even skip them if you wanted to. They have a shared health pool, so they'll keep respawning until their health bar depletes, and the person who thought of putting the spinning attack in this boss fight should be publicly humiliated. On the other hand, you at least have some sort of cover with the pillars in the Godskin duo fight, and generally I find the Godskins to be significantly easier than the Gargoyles individually, so naturally the duo version is going to be easier as well. In my opinion, the Gargoyle fight is worse. Not only do you not have any way to separate them, but even if one does remain behind, it can still snipe you with an accursed poison breath attack that can literally travel the entire arena in a cone. And if that wasn't enough, they can close the distance extremely quickly with several moves. I remember having a lot of trouble finding one of those guys when I first played the game, so you can imagine how I felt when I stumbled onto this fight. And look, I get it alright, the duo fights in Elden Ring are designed with the idea of using summons, and by not using summons, I'm just straight up ignoring a basic mechanic in the game and making the fights much more frustrating than what they should be. Fine, I can accept that, but that's still no excuse to create unbalanced, poorly designed, miserable duo boss fights. You are not excused just because quote-unquote the game has summons. I said this multiple times, but in Elden Ring especially, not a single thought was given in the design of duo boss fights. They just picked 2 random bosses, put them together in an arena, and told you to deal with it. I mentioned Black Myth Wukong earlier in the video, because that's an example of a game that does duo bosses extremely well. The bosses in that game are meant to complement one another's moves. It's clear that they were designed to exist as duo boss fights, and so the fights never feel unfair or tedious. That's unfortunately not the case with Elden Ring's duo boss fights, and this is perfectly represented by the Valiant Gargoyles. And that's it for this video guys. As always, please let me know your own thoughts and your own personal worst bosses of each game down in the comments. Again, thank you so much for letting me hit that 1000 subscriber milestone, I really do appreciate it. Guys, I'ma link my best bosses of each Soulsborne game video here, as well as in the description, if you want to check that out and show it some love. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.